Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to a new type of video. So before we really get into the purpose of this video, I just want to give a brief intro as to what we're going to be doing here. So in the previous few months, we had competitive analysis videos where I would sort of go over specific Pokemon and how to use them and stuff like that. They were sort of very formal, scripted, that type of thing. I'm going to try to get away from that a little bit and do a much more free-form type of video, but not totally free-form. It's basically, if you guys are familiar with, we also have a podcast in the league. I basically spend about 20 minutes per episode sort of just rattling things off the top of my head, kind of like I'm doing right now. But this is sort of going to be in between them. It's not going to be as formal as the previous competitive analysis videos, but at the same time, it's not going to be as freeform and random as the podcasts are. Hopefully, this is going to be a nice balance. The reason it took me so long to create these in the first place is frankly because I wasn't sure exactly what type of format I wanted for this video, but I'm going to try this. We're going to see how it goes and see what you all think of it, and hopefully moving forward, we can do more videos like this at a much greater frequency. So, without further ado, the topic for this video is going to be Pokemon that are good for beginners as far as people who are inexperienced with competitive battling. So, with the new generation out, it's been a couple of months, and a lot of people are now starting to get into the competitive scene, and they're seeing all of the information that's out there and all of the strategies, and it's a little overwhelming. So what I've done is I've created 6 Pokemon. It's not necessarily a perfect team of 6. There are some things that if you use it, there are certain Pokemon and certain other strategies you'll struggle with, but at least as a starting point, there are 6 Pokemon here that I think are very simple to use, and they have a diverse enough usage that you will sort of get a glimpse for pretty much everything that the competitive metagame has to offer. So, again, without further delay, let's just get into the list here. The first Pokemon I included on this list is Talonflame. There are a lot of things about Talonflame that I do not like, but as far as introducing you to the metagame, and as far as being a very powerful Pokemon that is very simple to use, Talonflame is great. It has a really good attack. It has a high speed, and its ability of Gale Wings allows it to have priority on its Brave Bird, so it's even faster. It's very hard to outspeed a Talonflame just by nature of its ability. Simply the existence of Talonflame means that somebody on your team somewhere is going to be taking great damage just because there's no way to outspeed it. The other thing, it has relatively acceptable coverage for its move options. There are some things it would like to do. There are certain rock Pokemon especially tend to wall it pretty effectively. But as far as a Pokemon that is very powerful and very simple to use, the type of thing that you can sort of rely on it as an emergency button. If things start to go wrong, you can send out Talonflame and it'll do a lot of work for you and clean things up. It's a nice safety valve. And that's one of the reasons why I personally don't use it, because like I said, there are some things that I don't like about it, which they're not the point of the video right now. But if you're just starting out for the first time, and the other thing about Talonflame is that it's very easily accessible in the game. Getting a Gale Wings one as you're playing through might be harder, but the fact that they are so common, and they're, the Spearow, or I guess they would be the Pidgey or the Hoot Hoot, the early birds that you get right off the bat in the game, the Talonflame is one of them. So it really just sort of sets the bar for simple Pokemon, but unlike the other previous birds, this one actually has a tremendous amount of power and utility to it. Moving along from Talonflame, we have another very fast, very powerful Pokemon, this one from the special side, in Jolteon. Now, Jolteon really is kind of like the special version of Talonflame. It's got a really high offensive power, again, this time on the special side. It has incredible speed. Naturally, there are very few Pokemon that outspeed it. And it also has a great ability. It grants your team an immunity to electricity. Plus, the other part, in addition to that immunity, is that, electric attacks will actually heal it and keep it healthy. So, if you plan it correctly, you can actually keep your Jolteon around and, regain its health after it's lost some. Jolteon is also great as a hit-and-run scout type with Volt Switch. You will need to be careful if somebody sends out a ground type against that, though. But if you use Jolteon just a couple of times and you sort of get stuck by a ground type that comes in, you sort of get used to it and you expect it and you counter it with, a Hidden Power Ice or something along those lines. So really, Jolteon and Talonflame, very similar Pokemon. Jolteon has much fewer moves to choose from as well. It can do really well. The only moves that it really needs to know are Thunderbolt and Volt Switch, really. Hidden Power Ice, like I said, is another good one. Shadow Ball, Signal Beam are both decent, but the bread and butter of Jolteon is Thunderbolt and Volt Switch, and between the two of them, Jolteon already is very tough to counter by Pokemon that aren't ground type. So it's another Pokemon that relatively popular, easily accessible, and has a tremendous amount of power behind it that you can use on your teams. Along those same lines, the third Pokemon that I want to talk about is Alakazam. Again, great speed, great special attack. The reason why I want to differentiate Alakazam from Jolteon, even though the two of them are incredibly similar, is Alakazam is different because it has more valuable coverage in that it has more types, and as far as its offense is concerned. Like, basically the moves that I listed with Jolteon are pretty much the only moves that it can learn, whereas Alakazam has all kinds of moves as Psychic, Psyshock, Energy Ball, Focus Blast, Shadow Ball, other ones that I'm forgetting, but it has a lot of options as far as offense is concerned, but it also has that same high attack, high speed type that makes it very hard to counter. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that Alakazam also has a Mega Form that increases all of those, and all of the factors that make Alakazam great are increased even further, so its speed is even higher, its special attack is even higher as well. It's probably between it and Scizor, which we will get to shortly. The two of them are probably the best Mega Forms as far as just starting out, if you're not familiar with the battle scene, simply because changing from Alakazam to a Mega Alakazam, they still have the exact same roles and the exact same functions. You're not really doing anything different from them. So if you're trying to figure out what Mega Evolution is all about and the type of impact it has in battles, I would probably start off with Mega Alakazam just to sort of get a feel for it before you dive too deep into all of the other more situational and tougher Mega Forms to use out there. So I mentioned Scizor as far as Mega Evolutions. Scizor is also on this list. It is on the list for a lot of the same reasons that Talonflame is, as far as great attack and priority attacks. Scizor doesn't have a great speed, but with its Bullet Punch, it doesn't really need one. But the other thing that makes Scizor great is its great typing. It only has a single weakness, and whenever that weakness is going to come at you, it's usually very obvious. Sending a Scizor out, it's pretty easy to pick out which of your opponent's Pokemon would have fire attacks on them, so it makes it pretty easy to protect your Scizor in that regard. It also has good base stats overall. Alakazam and especially Talonflame are kind of lacking as far as the total base stats are concerned. Scizors are actually quite solid overall. In addition, Scizor has the capability to set up, so if you're trying to, if you want to try your hand at having a setup sweeper that uses Swords Dance, Scizor is probably a good choice for that. It also has a lot of other setup options that you wouldn't necessarily use specifically for Scizor, but it also learns moves like Iron Defense and Agility, and if you want to use it in a Baton Pass chain, which is a relatively advanced tactic, but the point is that Scizor has a lot of setup options, and it also has access to Roost, meaning that it can set up and then heal itself off all of the damage that goes afterward, while the setup is going on, and then basically proceed to, theoretically at least, sweep through an entire opponent's team. So there's a reason why Scizor has been near the top of the usage charts for the past 3 generations, and it will continue to be there, primarily because of its incredibly strong Bullet Punch and its great typing. The Mega Form also helps. The Mega Scizor is probably a little bit more advanced than Mega Alakazam is. because, like I said, of all the other options that come into play as far as setting up. You could use, I've seen people use defog on their Mega Scissor. That seems to be a pretty common practice. So there's a lot of advanced tactics that come with Mega Scissor that you wouldn't get necessarily out of a Mega Alakazam. But it's still a very good choice, and it's relatively simple to use, and you can sweep through a lot of teams pretty much unchecked with it. So it fits the list. Now, I've talked about 4 incredibly offensive Pokemon up until this point, but even though the metagame is starting to shift into a hyper-offensive sort of setup, it's not always about offense. There are 2 defensive Pokemon that belong on this list, and we're going to talk about them one at a time. The first one is Blissey. Now, Blissey is a unique Pokemon in that it is a premier special wall. It is unkillable from the special side. Anyway, the only real way to knock out a Blissey is to hit it physically. If you try to hit it specially, it's going to survive and it's going to stall you out. The reason Blissey is so easy to use is because if you have your opponent is going to use a special attack, and again, much like seeing a fire attack come at your scissor, it's typically pretty easy to see a special attack coming at you from just about anywhere. So you'd send out Blissey against it, she would sponge it, and then, you know, the next turn you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. Blissey has a lot of support options. Wish Blissey, as far as being in the games, are rare, at least at the moment, but you have other options like Aromatherapy, Thunder Wave, Toxic. I don't think Stealth Rock is available yet, but I think once the Pokebank opens, which hopefully is soon, then Blissey will also have access to Stealth Rocks. So there's a lot of fun, good supporting moves that you can use on your Blissey to basically help you propel yourself to victory. Because it's not necessarily, Blissey won't necessarily win you matches on its own, just because it doesn't have a lot of offensive power, but the way it can cripple your opponents with status moves or force switches and rack up Stealth Rock damage, or cure your team from all the other crippling statuses that they are already suffering, Blissey is really important. And like I said, it's really easy to send it up against any special attack, and Blissey will pretty much wall it without fear. In much the similar way that Blissey will wall special attacks, the final Pokemon on the list is Skarmory. Now, Skarmory basically can wall any physical attack pretty much without prejudice. It has incredible defense. It has an amazing typing. The combination of its typing and its defense are the reason why it's so popular and it is so useful. Skarmory's base stats actually aren't really all that high, but because there are very few things that hit it even neutrally, Skarmory can wall a lot of things really effectively. So, you know, if there's an obvious physical attack coming at you, you could send out your Skarmory, and much the same way you could support with Blissey, you just do the same thing with Skarmory. You can set up spikes, you can set up Stealth Rocks on your Skarmory. Those are the 2 big ones. You can also Whirlwind away if you already have your entry hazard set up. When your opponent sends out the inevitable Skarmory counter, you can Whirlwind immediately and send them away. Skarmory also has access to Roost to heal itself up, which is amazing on walls. If you're going to use a wall, at least starting out for the first time, I would highly recommend using ones that have recovery, because they are the easiest ones, at least to start off with. It's much easier to keep them safe. If you have a wall that doesn't have recovery, it's much harder to keep it healthy than it is if they do have recovery, just for obvious reasons that it can heal itself up. The same thing even goes for a move like Wish. You can use walls with Wish, but Wish is a much more complicated and advanced move than something like a Recover or a Soft Boiled would be. Again, that's not necessarily being a deterrent from using it. It's just if you've never used a wall before and you want to see just how viable and how useful they can be, and just basically just how easy it is to wall things with them, try your hand at Skarmory with Roost and a Blissey with Soft Boiled, and you can see firsthand just how many things they stop and how easy it is that using them to support the rest of your team. So I kind of went pretty quickly through all of those. Hopefully it wasn't too much all at once. Again, this is sort of an experiment firsthand, so if you guys really like this video, please let me know. Give me some feedback on this. Hopefully I can take it into consideration, and even more hopefully, I will be having more videos and more content up for all of you soon enough. So this has been The Real Quaid. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later.